There's sarcasm in your voice.
A little bit of sarcasm in my voice.
Yeah.
I guess I'm feeling sarcastic right now about all of this.
Yeah, because it's all a joke.
It does.
It feels like this is a joke.
It feels like a joke if it weren't so important to so many people.
Mhm.
Like, that's the thing,
Mhm.
is like
I'm not going to follow this.
No, and you would say, this is just a crock. Like, who cares?
Yeah.
In this episode of the Dust or Mud podcast, we're going to unpack the controversial findings and recommendations of the 2025 Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee. We'll explore how these guidelines impact Americans, examine the science, or lack thereof, behind key recommendations, and discuss the influence of big food and pharma in shaping the nation's dietary advice. This episode aims to shed light on why these guidelines matter for everyone's health and challenge you to critically assess the advice you follow. Sit back, relax, and hang out with us as we bring you episode 90 of the Dust or Mud podcast.
Every 5 years, the United States government gets a committee of people together, and that committee of about 20 people, they come up with the dietary guidelines for Americans. And those people decide what we should and what we should not eat. It's 2025 coming up, and it's time for another set of dietary guidelines. We're going to discuss what's going on in the dietary guidelines right now. Welcome to the Dust or Mud podcast. I'm Shelley.
And I'm Rich.
After 25 years of Rich being in the Air Force, we left Washington, D.C. And you sat on some committees.
Oh, yeah.
You sat in some think tank groups.
Yes.
You've kind of been in that space.
Yes.
So coming a little bit of a different perspective or a familiar perspective, sometimes whenever we hear about these things, it sort of makes the, I don't know, spidey senses, the tingly thing that you get a bit on the back of your neck go,
Yeah.
what's going on here?
Right.
You know, you can kind of question things in a different way than other people, than even I can. We left that world and we started farming because we like good food. And actually, it turns out we don't want to eat what the guidelines say.
No.
We started growing our own food because we started learning about what we had been eating, what had been recommended to be eaten by Americans, and we wholeheartedly disagree with what's going on in those guidelines.
Yeah.
So it's time for a new set. Everyone's really encouraged. Hey, we've got a lot of new data. Let's put some new guidelines out there for Americans so that we can maybe get healthy.
Well, yeah. First off, why does it matter? Like, who cares? Who cares what the government says that we should or shouldn't eat, right? Like, what does it do? I think is the first thing to look at. Like, why does it,
like the guidelines themselves?
Yeah, like, why does it even matter? The biggest thing is that's what all of the government food programs are based on. So we've talked about the SNAP is 80% of the farm bill. So like, even our farm bill is based on what these guidelines say.
Right. Yeah. So, wow, you're right. I hadn't thought of it quite like that. But so government programs who receive government funding are required or mandated that they have to follow these guidelines. So you mentioned SNAP. Schools.
School lunches, school
hospitals.
Breakfast. Yep, all of your hospital meals.
Probably your nursing home type places.
Yep, senior meals.
Senior meals. So as a family, like, you can kind of do what you want.
WIC even.
WIC, okay.
Yep.
What they can receive on WIC.
That's right.
And that's pretty much a set type of foods: peanut butter, eggs, low-fat milk. There are actually
based on the dietary
guidelines. Right. So the young people in our country and the older people in our country are more affected by them because they're probably going to be in some setting that is being forced to follow these guidelines.
Well, and very significant for me, the military also. So your military meals are based on the U.S. government's dietary guidelines as well. So even MREs or your dining facility meals, they're all the foundation of all of that is your US government dietary guidelines. Your prisons,
Right. Oh,
like
yeah.
there are a lot. This actually, like, it matters to a lot of people. Millions of people are fed based on what these guidelines say.
Okay, so they get together a group of people.
Yep.
We've got 330 million something people in this country.
Yeah.
Well, it's a lot. And a lot of them
Yeah.
are highly educated and know things.
Yeah. They got together a group of 20.
Okay.
And I tell you, so we're going to go, they just released their report, and the report is what then the actual guidelines are based on. So this report, they've been working on it. This is a 2024 report, and it will form the foundation for what becomes the 2025 US Dietary Guidelines.
Right.
The 20 individuals, well, we've got three things that we think are the big issues for us with this report.
Mm-hmm.
It's a long, almost 500-page report. We did a skim, not a deep dive. We haven't had time. They just released it, but we skimmed it. We found three things that we believe are the key controversial issues
Mm-hmm.
for us in this report.
Well, and one of the biggest things for me is the first problem,
Which is?
conflicts of interest. By far, to me, that is the biggest problem, because that has the most influence, is the conflicts of interest of the people that they put onto this committee. There are 20 people, and a large portion of them have significant conflicts of interest within corporations, pharmaceutical companies, big food, and big ag.
Yeah.
And those are the three groups, or I guess groups of corporations, just big everything, that are going to benefit from whatever these guidelines say that Americans should eat, because that's where the money is going to go.
I'll link the report. There's a 35-page report that goes into each individual and their potential conflicts of interest. They label them as high, medium, low, or no risk of conflicts of interest. It's based on actual data, publicly available data. I'll also leave a link to the 5-page self-proclaimed conflicts of interest of the people that are on this committee.
The most notable thing is that nearly half of them had a conflict of interest, and some of them, Eli Lilly,
Novo Nordisk, Eli Lilly, Coca-Cola, Dannon.
Okay, interesting though, right? I mean, we can't accuse them of anything,
Yeah.
And we don't know necessarily who worked for or was tied to whom.
Well, if we look at the long report, you get a pretty good idea of who's tied to whom. The chairman of the entire board is very much tied to, like, baby formula and things like that. So, like, you can figure it out. Quite a few of them have ties to weight loss companies. So a healthy person doesn't need a weight loss company.
Right, and a healthy person doesn't need Novo Nordisk, who is it the company who makes Wegovy and Ozempic?
Yep. There's one that's tied to the folks that found, I believe, the GLP-1 inhibitors.
Yeah. Okay, so we have conflicts of interest with these 20 people. It's a very small group of people, by the way, and they're all doctors and PhDs. They're very, very smart people. They've gone to high, very renowned universities, right?
Yeah.
But back to my point of there are 330-something million people in this country, and the 20 that we put on this board, nearly half of them have conflicts of interest with these companies.
Right. Yeah, we couldn't find...
But people who were non-biased.
We couldn't find 10 more people.
No, that weren't biased, who weren't influencing or influenced by the money in this country.
Yeah.
Okay.
Their self-proclaimed list is a 5-page list, and it only covers the last 12 months.
typically whenever they do conflicts of interest and they have disclosures, a lot of times companies will report 5 years.
Yeah. The 35-page report that I'll link as well, I believe it goes back 5 years.
Okay.
But that one isn't like self-proclaimed. It's just, hey, what public information is available for the 20 people that are on the board.
Right.
So it's has nothing to do with private. It's just like, they were speakers at this conference that was put on by Coca-Cola. It can list those types of things.
Yeah.
There are some, it lists out some honorariums where it's like, they were given $3,500 for this and $5,000 for that.
So perhaps if we're going to make guidelines who are then made into requirements for what people should eat in institutions across this country, maybe we should have some stricter standards on who we put onto the committee to make these decisions for our nation.
We're certainly not the first people to say that. This is not the first time that it's been brought up. That this issue has been an issue for years and is brought up every single time, and every time it is ignored.
And it's ignored again.
Yeah.
And I guess it will be again. What we're trying to do is just bring light to it and let people know you can think and research for yourself.
And one of the things I was seeing in 2022, there's like $169 million from the agribusiness industry spent lobbying in Congress, in DC. There's like I think it was 39 million from the big food.
Yeah.
But agribusiness, over $160 million in 1 year.
That's a lot of money. Paying politicians. I mean, that's what it's doing. Paying politicians.
You wonder why
Making
things
sure that
get bad and can't change.
Right. Yeah.
Well, we can talk about how it got bad later or on another podcast, but it doesn't change because all of the money that's spent keeping it the same.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It's crazy. So second key issue we find with their scientific study is,
well, because it's recommendations, right? It's guidelines on what you should and what you should not eat. They found enough evidence, scientific-based evidence, to recommend the restriction of red meat and saturated fat.
Yeah. Somehow.
And
I'm sure it has nothing to do with the person on the committee who is funded by Beyond Meat, nor does it have anything to do with the Harvard Chan School of Medicine, whatever committee member that is consistently putting out anti-meat propaganda.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, couldn't have any. There's sarcasm in your voice.
A little bit of sarcasm in my voice.
Yeah.
I guess that I'm feeling sarcastic right now about all of this.
Yeah, because it's all a joke.
It does.
It feels like this is a joke.
It feels like a joke if it weren't so important to so many people.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's the thing, is like
I'm not going to follow this.
No, and you would say, this is just a crock. Like, who cares?
Yeah.
Like, I obviously, this is junk science.
It's bogus.
It's not based on anything, or it's based on the same crap that they always base it on. And like, whatever, I'm going to largely ignore it like I have been.
Yeah, but the second grader sitting in school can't.
The prisoner can't. The military member can't.
Right.
Yeah. So they were able to find enough scientific evidence that they said they are going to recommend that the red meat and saturated fat be limited.
Yeah. And clinical trials cited in support of these recommendations failed to show statistically significant health benefits.
Right. So and that's why I throw out the word junk science. They've found some studies, and some of them are like the Harvard School of Medicine studies that we've talked about in the past, where it's fairly junky science,
Yeah.
and they make recommendations against red meat, and they have used those types of studies with sparse or no evidence,
Hmm.
and they have cited those studies as the evidence for, okay, we should limit the intake
Right.
of red meat.
Right.
Now, don't eat red meat if you don't want to eat red meat.
Sure.
Like, I don't care.
Yeah.
But to list it as
A limit, a restriction.
a restriction,
We should restrict how much we eat. That's different.
yeah, like if I were going to make any guideline, it would be eat more red meat
Yeah.
because of the health benefits.
Because it's nutrient dense and it's good for you.
Right. I mean, like, that's something that scientifically you can prove, the nutrient content in red meat.
Yes.
You
Yes.
can prove the iron content in red meat. Like, there are
Mhm.
there are nutrients that are there, and that is provable.
And it's provable that it is more bioavailable
Correct.
source of nutrition
Protein even,
and protein than, say, the alternative of plant proteins.
which is what they're recommending instead of red meat, is all of the different plant proteins.
Eat plant proteins if you want to.
Right.
By all means, there is protein in plants, but the bioavailability, the amount, the concentration, and what you actually get from them is just different.
Right.
Ay. Well,
Which leads us to the last, what we think of as a conflict with this particular report, and that is there was not enough scientific evidence for them to recommend against ultra-processed foods.
yeah, they did not recommend limiting the amount of ultra-processed foods in the American diet.
So the report states that there are, let me get the numbers exact.
They cited that there was insufficient evidence, despite bipartisan concern. This concerns everyone, both sides of the aisle.
Yeah.
First
So
of all.
that 73% of U.S. adults are overweight or obese, and 38% of teens are pre-diabetic. In their report is what they say.
It's probably caused by saturated fat.
And red meat. No.
No,
And
it isn't.
They talk about, I mean, they even talk about the ultra processed foods,
Mhm.
UPFs,
Yep.
the ultra processed foods. They talk about how calorie dense they are, how they
Mhm.
are hyper palatable,
Mhm.
how they do not have the things in them that trigger our satiety mechanisms so that you just continue to eat.
You can't just eat just one.
No one can eat just one.
That's right.
Right? So, like, they talk about that.
They know that that's there. They know it's a
Correct.
problem.
That's right. But somehow there's not enough scientific evidence to recommend against ultra-processed foods. But yet there was enough scientific evidence to recommend against red meat. Like the lunacy, there's that word again,
Yep.
the lunacy of red meat should be limited, but ultra-processed foods should not be limited is just ridiculous. That, like, if you could prove a conflict of interest,
Mhm.
it would be something like that.
Mhm.
A thing that is guaranteed good for you is limited. Things that are guaranteed bad for you, unlimited. The only way you can get there is a conflict of interest.
1,000%. Yeah, that's the only way. Because nobody in their actual right minds, these quote nutritionists and these PhDs and have all of these laundry, list of degrees hanging on their wall. There's no way that these people think that this is okay, that these are actually healthy for you. Because I guarantee you, they don't have them in their pantry. Not by much. I bet you they don't. I bet you that, I don't eat that. Well, why not? Well,
I don't know.
my kids don't eat it, right? Like I bet you actual money that they do not have a lot of these things in their pantry because they know that they're not good for their kids and they're not good for themselves. I'm telling you. I personally think that the concept of these guidelines, well, first of all, guidelines sounds like it's kind of just a recommendation, but it really becomes a mandate to the institutions and organizations who receive federal funding. And in my opinion, the only way to really get out of this horrible mess that we're in with our diets in this country is to just eliminate them. Just eliminate them, because it's making people have to do things that they don't necessarily want to do. And let's start over. Scrap it, because there's too much money, there's too much outside messed up influence going into them. It's just money.
I think start over.
Nobody cares.
I think start over is a better way to look at it than do away with it completely.
Let's just,
because
yeah, but
just take military, right? Like you have to base what meals they're eating on something, right? Like it has to be based on something. Otherwise, they could say, here's your crackers. Like there has to be some acknowledged, accepted, nutritional guidelines, right? Like here's the type of nutrition that we should provide to our military members. I think that you have to have something, but I
Okay.
think starting over is a great idea. Somehow, if we could only find 20 people that aren't tied to big food, big pharma, lobbyists, like all of the, if we could find some folks without conflicts of interest.
At the end of the day, these guidelines are on behalf of, not because of, or they're not trying to tell they're not to tell American people what to do, but these are on behalf of the American taxpayer.
Yeah. Right.
So these people are supposed to be getting together and coming up on behalf of the American taxpayer. Hey, this is where we want federal money to go to feed our military, to feed the people in prison, sure, to feed the kids in our schools. On behalf of us, this is where we would like our taxpayer dollars to go to feed these folks.
Right.
And they get together. And unfortunately, why in the world Coca-Cola is in the room at all? Why in the world this doesn't have anything to do with pharmaceuticals. This doesn't have a thing to do with the price of rice. I don't care. It has to do with the nutrition of the kids in the schools.
Right. You shouldn't have weight loss companies in there.
A weight loss company should have no say in it.
Right.
Absolutely none. I don't even think agriculture should have a say in it. I don't think anyone should. This should be a group of people, bipartisan, or you call it what you want, a group of unbiased, bipartisan human beings who have an understanding of basic nutrition and the things that the human body needs, and they get together and they come up with, on behalf of the taxpayers, hey, this is what people should be eating. And instead they're influenced ridiculously by all of this money.
Yeah. There's a lot of it too.
And the kindergartner is the one suffering,
right? Because
that kindergartner is going to be in the military. No, I'm sorry. I correct myself. That kindergartner isn't going to make it to the military because they're going to be pre-diabetic by then. And they're not going to qualify for the military because what these folks have decided the kindergartner should eat their entire life.
Yep.
And by the time you get to be 18 years old, you're not even qualified because you've been eating the things that these people want to sell you. This is nothing but a sales tactic from the big companies to the American people to get a customer for life.
Yes. From the ultra processed foods to the drugs that result.
Right. Paid for by us.
Yes.
Who absolutely disagree with nearly everything in the guidelines.
Right.
Because the basis that they come at, they will not just say, this junk is bad. I'm not saying they can't make the thing. Make Coke. Make Doritos. Make all of the junk food. I don't care what you do. Make it. But make the flour. Make all of the pizzas. That's fine. It's a free country. But don't mandate that these kids eat it. I'm most worried about the kids, you know?
Yeah, we'll go back to the no restrictions on ultra processed foods, restrictions on red meat.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Okay. Like it's junk. I don't have any, I can't respect what they have to say because of their conflicts of interest. I can't even hear you.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it matters.
It does matter.
That's the point, is that it is actually unfortunate that these committees, this committee in particular, their recommendations actually matter. And it matters to all of us, really, even if you just take the military, because those are the folks that are defending us.
I have an idea for whoever's about to come be the head of all of this stuff. Why don't you scrap it?
Yeah.
Reconvene a committee that makes sense.
Well,
who can actually come up with something that is good for them.
That is one good thing, that because the report was just now released, this scientific report, there are 60 days for comment, and then they have to adjudicate the comments, and then they make the guidelines. That happens after a change of administration. So no matter how you feel about the change of administration, the actual guidelines are going to be published by the new administration. So there is an opportunity for this junk science to be tossed and have some other guidelines that are based on something other than the millions of dollars that are spent buying off the reports.
Mm-hmm. Cool. That's good. Who do we call?
Well, obviously, you can call your congressman, right?
True.
Yeah, I think that's probably the best bet. Is
when they say when you said open for comments, that is public comment
on
public comment from anybody.
Yeah.
Okay.
Typically, from what I've seen from my research, typically the comments are dominated by the food industry.
Yeah, I saw that too.
That is part of where they spend their millions of dollars, is in commenting on things like this. So if there was a recommendation against ultra-processed foods, then they would just flood the comment section against that recommendation.
Got it.
So that's where the majority of the comments come from, is from the industry affected by the report, not me and you.
But there are over 300 million people.
That's true.
We can affect the change that we want.
That's true.
We really can. You can vote with your dollars, and you can call your congressman. You can call your senator. You can make comments to this.
That's right.
And that's a lot of bombardment. If we as the people said to them, no.
Right. Yeah. I mean, individually, you can vote with your dollar.
Sure.
Buy whole food.
Yeah.
Find it local if you can. If you can't, got it. Not everyone can.
Right.
Buy whole food. Don't buy the ultra processed foods.
Right.
And there. Now,
vote with your dollar.
Now your life has now changed.
Sure.
As far as changing the life of those who rely on these government programs for their nutrition, that's where what you just said comes in.
The people who get SNAP, the benefit that they have is that they are allowed to use that to buy any food, and therefore you can make the choice to buy the whole food. I know that it's more expensive, but it is also more nutritious.
Yeah.
So if you did decide to make that decision for your family and use those benefits to promote or to buy the whole food for your family, that speaks volumes as well.
Consider money saved staying out of the doctor's office, getting off of the prescriptions. If you consider that as money saved, that is money that is available to spend on whole food.
True. That's right.
So the cost of the cheap ultra-processed food comes in the doctor's visits and the prescriptions.
Well put. Hey, if you guys enjoyed this podcast, then we welcome you to Insteader Nation. I like your shirt, by the way.
Thank you.
What does it say? I don't know what that one says. Insteader. So wait a minute. Let me back up just a second. An insteader, if you're new here, an insteader is someone who decides to do something instead of what they say we're supposed to do. And so we don't follow the dietary guidelines. We eat whole homegrown food instead. So that would be kind of an instead.
So what this says is insteader, one who prefers self-reliance and sustainable living instead of conventional norms.
And mine says live life on your own terms insteader. Hey, if you like these t-shirts, we do have them at Air to Ground Farms. They're for sale. There's a whole bunch of different styles that you can choose from. There's some for women, like short sleeves. There's dude stuff that's got skulls, I think, and stuff like that. So, hey, go check those out. If you think that you're an insteader as well, go get an insteader t-shirt. We were just feeling much in the mood right now. And until next time, bye, y'all.
Bye, y'all.